popping the music in my brain.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Shadow and Sun Show, and welcome back to another Preppers for Gamers episode. Tonight we're going to be talking. This morning we're going to be talking about staying off the grid and surviving off the grid for an entire 30 whole days without the internet, without electricity, unless you happen to have a solar or gas generator, which we'll get into among other things. To my right or left, depending on how you're sitting and how your cameras and screens work, is my good friend Bo from Bo Paints Minis. How you doing this morning?
I'm well, and this is an interesting thought experiment we're going to be delving into.
Yeah, it's not the toughest of the tough. Going 6 months or something like that. Good luck on that one. I don't think anybody in the States has had to do so since before the internet, but we'll get there when we get there. So what are your initial thoughts? Besides, oh man, this is gonna suck.
Well, my initial thought when someone talks about long-term preps, my first thought is bulk in space. If you're living in any kind of urban or suburban environment, even in most rural environments,
Hey, Raven.
You're talking about thousands of pounds of food, thousands of pounds of water, thousands of pounds of fuel, whether that's wood or coal or gasoline. You want your car to move for that, say, 1 month. We talked about that last night. You need stabilized gasoline, stabilized diesel fuel. So you're going to need to stock up on your gasoline stabilizer, propane, kerosene, whatever it is that you use. You're still going to need a medium of exchange. You're still going to need communications. So by this point, I hope you've invested in a decent amateur radio and an amateur radio license, if not a general license and a general, a high frequency radio. So
not just a CB, but something like a ham radio.
No, not a CB. No. I'm telling you, a high frequency radio. You want to be able to, even a 2 meter will get you. You can talk about 40, 50 miles, depending on atmospheric conditions. Of course, a high frequency radio, you could talk to Japan, depending on atmospheric conditions and atmospheric bounce. So these are just things you've got to really consider if you want to get off the grid long term. Again, 1,000 pounds of wheat, 1,000 pounds of rice, 1,000 pounds of beans.
And that's for how many people?
Well, you at least everybody in your family.
Well, 1,000 pounds of rice.
No, time, right? When you start, I know you've done shows on this before. When you did a show about your circle of friends, right? Your circle of influence. And if you want to be off the grid for 6 months or more, you better have at least 3 or 4 families in your circle, because after about the first couple of months, or after the first 3 or 4 weeks, everyone's going to be sniffing out your preps, right? So you're going to have somebody to stand guard while you sleep. Even like a post Hurricane Katrina, post Superstorm Sandy situation, no man was an island. I think you can do it by yourself for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but after that, when the lights are still on at your house and the lights aren't anywhere else on the block, things are going to get weird.
And by weird, you mean ugly?
By weird, I mean that the people that you thought were your friends might not be your friends anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Your neighbor. This is an example. Everything is purely an example, hypothetical. But your neighbor who bought a boat while you spent that same money on a Generac generator, you think he's going to be happy that he spent all of his money on a boat when you spent your money on preps? No. You think he's going to think about that rationally? No. You think he's going to say that it's not fair that your lights are still on and your kids are eating while his kids aren't? That's what he's going to be saying.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And you think when the situation does get back to normal, that person's still going to be your friend? Nope. That relationship is gone. Those bridges are burned. And that was that episode of Twilight Zone, right? The guy that built the shelter. The guy builds a shelter, but it was a false alarm. But
Yeah,
you think,
Twilight Zone. Is that what you said?
yeah, yeah, the one where the guy built the bomb
thinking, I was thinking that exact thing
yeah,
a moment ago.
That's what happened. That guy's not your friend anymore.
Yeah, that whole neighborhood. It's time to move out of that freaking neighborhood because they all suck.
So when you think about
Pardon?
I was gonna say when you think about preps past 2 weeks, past you're going into that 1 month, 2 month, 3 months. What do you think? Realistically, what what kind of threats are you thinking about that's going to have you down for more than say 2 weeks into that into that real serious self-reliant zone, right?
Yeah, and mostly you're looking at a generally localized weather condition or potentially some sort of economic or societal collapse. But I mean, those are sci-fi kind of situations. The EMP, if anything like that happens, you're so far off the beaten path that you're probably never going to come back, and only 10% of the people are going to survive that kind of thing completely intact or less, let alone just barely hanging on. You're the entire way of life in the United States at least would be completely different and shoved back 100 years or more.
Think about Hurricane Katrina is probably still our best domestic example of dealing past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and people that were on the Gulf, whether they were in on the Mississippi side or the Louisiana side, during Katrina, their situation became so unique in that they had to avoid damage to their preps to things like storm surge. If you have all your stuff in a shed, obviously they don't have basements in Louisiana. You dig about 2 inches into the ground and you're already at the water table.
Yeah.
I mean, they're even their cemeteries are above ground down there, for crying out loud. So when you start thinking about preps, space and that the kind of security, Shadow, that will keep your stuff safe from things like mold and mildew and rust
and vermin.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Keeping mice and rats out of your bulk grain. If you say you have thousands of pounds of bulk grain, rice, beans, wheat, rye. Maybe you threw some other stuff in there for variety, like barley. Here's one that most folks don't consider. Here's $1 worth of free advice. If you store food in plastic buckets, you can't put the plastic buckets on concrete. You have to have those plastic buckets up off the concrete, right? Because it'll cause the buckets to rot, and it could poison the food. So what I do is I put down either furring strips, which are thin wooden strips, or even pallets to keep your plastic buckets off bare concrete.
I did not know that. Wow, that's really good to know. And if you think cardboard is going to keep anything out other than dust, you're sorely mistaken. I had a small prepper beginner box many years ago, and I went and checked on it one day, and there was a hole through the box, through another box, leading to that box to get into things that I would have never guessed an animal could smell. I'm pretty sure it was just a rat, but it was quite persistent. And yeah, even plastics. I'm wondering, in certain areas if that's going to be even good enough.
Now, if you're in a
I was
place that
thinking
has
glass
like the,
and
the, the
metal.
Norwegian rats, if you're anywhere near the coast, if you're anywhere near a coast, you're gonna have to deal with a whole different animal, both in terms of humidity and in terms of rodents. What I did with my longer term preps, I bought the 3 or 5 mil mylar bags, the like the 1 gallon mylar bags, and I
Yeah,
think I showed this on the show before. And oxygen absorbers. I went down to Costco. You can go to Sam's Club, Costco, and bought most of my grain there. I'm fortunate if I can. I mean, at the Costco here down the street, I can buy 5 gallon buckets of raw wheat. It's just a popular enough item here that the Costco's even carry it. But if you buy, say, you bought a 50-pound bag of wheat, and you can divide that 50-pound bag of hard red wheat or hard white wheat, pour it into a mylar bag, it'd be maybe 5 or 6 pounds, and one oxygen absorber, and you can seal it with a clothes iron. And then you know that it's worked because the oxygen absorber will cause the bag to collapse enough that you can actually see the grain inside the bag. It's just shrunk wrapped it. And then you can add about 5 of those to a 5 gallon bucket, maybe 6 of those to a 5 gallon bucket.
mm-hmm.
If you're really serious, you could add a piece of dry ice to the inside of that bucket before you seal it, because that will cause the bucket to also cause it to seal. I've never had to do that because I've sealed each of my bags. Also makes them easy to use individually. When I open up a bag, it's this much rice or this much beans or this much wheat. And then the rest of it is still sealed, in the bucket. I remember I don't know if you remember this, about 10 years ago, there was a rice crop failure.
There's
And
one going on right now in India.
That will cause the price of rice to spike. Even, you live in, California produces more rice than China.
Yeah.
California exports its rice all over the world. California exports its rice to India and China both. So what I did right when that, right around that time, before things got stupid, I bought maybe about 200 pounds of rice and sealed it all up like that, sealed it up in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. And once you have it, it's not going to go bad because it's in an airtight bag. If you're interested in food storage again, past 2 weeks, you've got to start thinking about things like that. Thinking about staples. You can still get number 10 cans from number 10 cans of freeze dried food or dehydrated food. Sorry, that's but I mean, what things would you recommend doing past, for food storage, for example? You've got to find a way to cook it. Kerosene, propane, white gas.
I was talking to Raven a moment last night actually about rocket stoves. What do you think?
I've got one that's mostly just boils water. There are a number on the market. The ones that boil water, I especially recommend, because if most of your food is going to be stewed or freeze dried or dehydrated, a lot of those stoves can boil water very quickly with very little fuel.
Right. Can you, for the audience at home, can you basically explain a rocket stove?
Well, there are different kinds. I've got one called the Kelly kettle, and a Kelly kettle is basically it's a water kettle with a giant hole in the middle of it, like a donut shaped kettle, and it sits on a stand, and the stand is very efficient at drawing air into it. And a lot of these rocket stoves, what they do is they work basically by forced air. And because they're drawing air past the fuel source, they're very high efficiency heaters. They suck that air in, and they get to a very high heat with a very low fuel. They're
So
really popular
basically,
with
you can use.
campers.
So basically, you can use like twigs and sticks
Yeah,
to cook them,
to at least
as
boil
opposed
water.
to needing to make an entire campfire. You're using, a bundle of sticks.
Right,
Sorry,
and you can
to
use
put as a fire source. Um,
and you can use like
or
things very pitchy, sappy wood. That you, the only problem I've had with mine is if I've used things like pine cones or pine twigs, they tend to leave a lot of soot, a lot of that really sticky, creosote type soot on the
right,
inside that you have to just scrape
stuff you
off.
don't want on the inside of your
Stuff you
fireplace.
don't want, stuff
Um,
you don't want on the inside of your fireplace for, but because it's a rocket stove, and typically every time I've used mine, I've used it in a fire ring, at a campsite or a place where I've
right.
just cleared off. Mostly, I've used those things to experiment, and once I tried them 2 or 3 times to make sure that they work in a way that I'm used to it, I just put them away.
Right.
Um, but
And if you look around, you can go on YouTube's and find quick ways to make them if you don't want to buy them.
yeah,
I've seen them made with cinder blocks and things like that,
right,
just so you could literally take it apart and use it as a wall or a table, or you could use it to, cook your food, with very little, very few sticks or twigs,
right,
and another good thing about them is less fire, which means less smoke. Obviously, you're going to get the smell of what you're cooking, but if there aren't people around too close, then they're not gonna get a whiff of it. If you've got next door neighbors, that's a different thing.
right.
And again, if you've got literally next door neighbors, you need to get with them and let them know that either we're going to work together, or I will keep you off the property one way or the other.
I have a question for you then. To you, in your estimation, again, we're talking about more than 2 weeks, more than a month. This long term living. How important is comfort and maintaining your current lifestyle then in this kind of grid dense situation? I mean, how important would it be to you to live as close to normally as you are right now?
Me personally, I've had this mindset since I was a youngster, that survival is number one. Period.
Sure.
There's a lot of things you can live through and survive and tolerate, as opposed to living in the lap of luxury 24/7 for the rest of your life. Well, that's going to be a very short life in these kinds of situations. You may be able to eat your favorite meal for a week, and then you're out, and then you're completely clueless as to how to survive, and like we talked about, where people get to the point where they'd rather die than eat another plate of beans. I'm not going to ever get to that point. I'll eat the freaking cactus if I have to. I won't like it, but I used to take apple cider vinegar every morning in a cup with a little bit of lemon juice, and that's the nastiest stuff
Yeah,
drink.
you're supposed to
And
make
so
food with it.
I can choke down whatever it takes to make sure that I live another day, unless I'm riddled with radiation sickness, or missing limbs and crap like that, to where quality of life, it doesn't even exist. You're just breathing to breathe. No. But if I'm functional, and there's hope, because that's a big one. You've got to have that, to some extent. Without it, you could have, another Twilight Zone episode. You have all the books you've ever wanted to read, but if you don't have the glasses to read them, you're going to lose hope real quick. Had he had his glasses, he would have hope. He'd have a reason to keep on going. That thing that he loved is right there. All he now needs to do is, set some traps and let the animals come to him, and he's good to live out the rest of his life in with a good deal of happiness. You have to have happiness on the horizon at the very least, or there is no point. If you're just living to breathe, you've got to have something to think about to motivate you to keep on going. Otherwise, what are you doing with your life?
Well, that's what I'm asking. I mean, imagine, if you will, again, like the Twilight Zone, but now imagine the grid's down, power's down, whatever happened, and you went out and you're serving your family a big plate of beef stew and rice that you made yourself, not Dinty Moore beef stew, but you pulled a big chunk of beef out of your freezer. You cooked it, you seared it, you stewed the vegetables, you cooked it in your pressure cooker, whatever. You served it on a nice plate of rice. You got done with your meal. You go down to the living room with your family. You pop on a DVD and you watch the Ten Commandments. You watch The Greatest Story Ever Told, whatever. You have a family night in your house while the world has gone to crap around you. Like I had a buddy of mine who coined the term. He coined the term thrivalism. Right? He said it's not about survivalism; it's about thrivalism. And I think that, and I don't know if everybody even wants to do that. But what my point is, Shadow, is how close can you get to that? How close can you be to being in that situation?
Well, like I said before, it's going to start with a frame of mind. You have to have something, to look forward to on the horizon, even if it's just the next, crop in your backyard. It could be, many different things. That's your guys' mileage is going to vary. But if you don't, it's just a matter of time before you're eating your shoes and worse. But if you know enough, if you've got enough skills and knowledge up in your thinking meat, then you can turn anything around. That's what we had to do to make this country great in the first place. People came, to like California with whatever they could fit in a wagon, and mostly tools to build anew, to start from scratch from the local trees and things like that in the local area, and their knowledge and the desire to make their life better. They could have stayed where they were and probably been just fine, but that spirit of improvement and the desire to make things better you've got to have that. You've got to have that in not just in your mind, but in the minds of those around you. Everybody's got to be looking, reading from the same page and working towards the same goal.
Right. Well, so again, most of us, we're not there because we're not prepared to deal, not even prepared to really live in a situation where the gas pumps are turned off. Prepared to live in a situation where the stores are closed. Look at the runs that we had on toilet paper, for crying out loud, during COVID. Oh, can I even say that? During the great bug boogaloo. So how do we get people prepared? Again, what I propose is looking at what you have now, and you've got to start multiplying it. If you want your car to move, Crafty Gamer, I don't disagree with you, but I've said that if people come to my house, they better be prepared to work, but I don't know if I'm prepared to feed them either. If there is nothing, there is nothing. You can't get blood out of a turnip. So yeah, a strong arms and a strong back and some skills. I mean, I can use a plumber. I could use an electrician, but or a car mechanic. But I'm not talking about the end of the world as we know it. I'm not talking about a world without rule of law. I'm talking about post Hurricane Katrina. Like I said, that went on for months. In a post Hurricane Katrina situation, that again that could last. Say there's something in your
Fair enough,
neighborhood.
he was just referencing what I said with working together with your neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a, you know, you know, uh, an accountant or an office worker or something like that, you better bring something to the table besides just an empty stomach. You better have some skills. You better just because you're willing to work and take orders, that doesn't mean squat.
Oh,
That's not going to get you a meal at my house. You better be bringing some firewood or some tools or some skills that I desperately need. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you hit the road. Good luck.
no.
Maybe
It's
give you a
again.
bottle of water
This
if
is
I'm
not.
feeling
This is not
generous,
the end of the
but
world.
probably not.
This is a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month situation, right? You can
And
bring
you can
cash. I like cash. Cash is awesome.
right,
I like
but
precious metals and I like barter goods. You can bring all that stuff to me too. If you
the
just
only
want to eat at my
problem,
table,
however, even in a 30-day situation, you can die of starvation or thirst.
well, you can, but I won't.
Right, right.
But
But
I mean, if you're an
if
accountant,
you
you can come do my taxes for me while I'm. You can find me some great deductions. I hope you have a way to deal with that internet.
right,
But you might end up paying $50 for a plate of beans. Be prepared. Be prepared to be called a hoarder. It's not true, but it's a vile insult that people that can't cope like to throw around.
yeah, I actually hear that on a semi-regular basis, and it has nothing to do with the foods and water and things like that that I store. Um,
No,
they're gonna do all kinds of things.
you're an
As soon as
RPG
they do
hoarder.
anything, untoward or violent, that's when you may have to make an example of just how far you're willing to go. But that's the discussion for another time.
But remember, the
One thing we
situation's
haven't
not
really
permanent.
right. We
Eventually,
haven't talked about water. That's like damn near number one.
yeah, I would recommend investigating filters and I mean if you're on well water, that's awesome. If you're in a situation where the water might get just entirely turned off, I mean, I'm fortunate enough I live in a place where there are enough streams and springs that run year round. The water's not always perfectly good to drink as is, but it can
Mm-hmm.
be filtered and it can be boiled. We talked about pre-filtration, and I also recommend again. They're the what are the things called? They're large. You see them on farm trucks. Large baskets, like a plastic tank with a steel frame around it, and you can pick those up typically for fairly inexpensively. But then you've got to have a place to store it. Water weighs about 7 pounds a gallon.
Mm-hmm.
Where will you store 100 gallons of water? You're not going to store it in your attic because your roof's not going to be able to hold that concentrated weight. Um, if you're serious about water storage, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to buy a large tank, and then because if you put it underground, you're going to have the means. You're going to have to be able to pump the water. Water doesn't move uphill. Water only moves downhill. You can invest in a hand pump. You can invest in a battery powered pump. Um, you can invest in an electric pump. But if you get a large there are large tanks available fairly inexpensively in
Yep.
terms of cost. It's not the cost, it's where you're going to put it and how you're going to keep the water clean. You can treat it with bleach. Just even a couple drops per gallon will keep it clean for years. It won't taste very good. You can also
But
clean it right before you
but
use it.
you can also, excuse me, filter it if you have that luxury.
And
After
you
you've bleached
should.
it, you can filter it. And yeah, absolutely, you should. The last thing you need is diarrhea or worse because of
It is.
right.
Diarrhea, believe I'm not kidding. Diarrhea is like the number one killer of children in the world.
Yep.
Believe that? Diarrhea
Yeah.
kills
I
more
have
people
have
than
you been
almost
outside
anything
the
else
U.S.? Yeah,
outside the U.S. And
absolutely.
that can easily happen. We take hygiene for granted, and hygiene is not a luxury. Hygiene is a necessity, and that includes what you put in your mouth. So if you want clean water and clean food, you have to make those considerations now for the time when if the grocery stores were closed for longer than a week or two. And that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about a month, 2 months, 6 months. This is not without rule of law. This is not Teotwalkie. This is a prolonged disaster. This is a prolonged power outage. This is a prolonged pandemic, a pandemic that really works. If you have to be home and be inside for a month,
Um,
what will you do? Well, I had a buddy years ago, a different guy. He was an old school prep guy. And he said what he would do is he would make a whole like a stock pot full of rice pudding because he could make rice pudding with just rice and raisins and condensed milk, and he would just give it to his whole neighborhood because we all have this incredible sweet tooth. We don't get sweets every day. We're gonna die. So here, look, everybody can have rice pudding. And he thought, he could buy off his neighbors. And it was kind of a clever idea. Whether it's 100% true or not, think about things like that. What can you do to easily buy off your neighbors? Like I said, here's a plate of beans and here's a plate of rice. That's what I'm eating, so you can eat it too.
absolutely.
Um, and if you need to buy off your neighbors so they don't burn your house down, because again, you can't shoot him when you know that the sheriff's going to come around eventually.
Well, couldn't you just shoot him too?
No, because eventually, again, the rule of law, the lights are going to come back on. You shoot the
You
sheriff,
need
if you
to see
shoot the
that was
sheriff,
a
he's going to.
joke. That was my
Yeah, I know.
joking
Well,
thing.
you can shoot the
Um,
sheriff, but you can't shoot the deputy.
there you go. I was waiting for that. See how I set you up? A little trick I learned from a buddy of mine who works at a water heater company is if everybody's leaving, because it's getting bad or whatever, they want to go to the FEMA camps and be turned into Soylent Green, and you decide to stick it out. Every one of those water heaters still has water in it.
Oh yeah, sure, and like 30, 40 gallons,
Yeah,
depending
and
on the size of the
if you
heater.
look at your neighborhood with a wrench, they've left, and you could find a way into their garage. Mind you, this is you know not something I would recommend, but I've you know kept that filed up away just in case of an emergency. You can go in there with a couple of buckets and drain the water heater because they probably don't know how, and 30, 40 gallons. I know how long that lasts my family, and I know how long let's say 30 gallons. You got three people. That's a gallon a day for 10 days.
Right. And so I would
They're gonna,
recommend people learn how to learn your own house.
yeah,
Learn what your house can do. Learn how to turn the gas off. Learn how to turn the water off. Learn how to drain your water heater. Learn, learn your plumbing situation. One of the biggest things, one of the biggest considerations with with self sufficiency is learning those kinds of things, and it's not
yeah.
hard.
Yeah. If all you do is just buy and stock and hoard, you're really not going to make it very long once everything runs out. You need to be able to do the things. If you need to, break out a wrench or a hammer or a saw, you need to know how to do that stuff. Trying to teach yourself how to use those things. If you've never swung a hammer and now all of a sudden you need to, yeah, you might want to just do a little practice beforehand. Grab some nails, grab a hammer, and you know take a piece of wood and just practice.
Yeah, when it's
And then practice pulling those nails out, and then practice trying to straighten them, and then do it again.
when it starts raining is not the time to learn how to build an ark.
Right, right.
So there's
And
again.
Justin, I'm not a hoarder. I'm a holder. If that makes any sense.
And if you bought your things in a time of plenty, by definition, you can't be a hoarder because everybody else could have gone and bought those same things
and chose not to.
It's a time of plenty, and I told people, when the supply chain started catching up after the great Chinese boogaloo, I said, look, now is the time to think about all the things that you missed during that 6-month period, and make sure that you've got plenty of it now. Oh, you were out of toilet paper for a long time? What, you had to, use your hand or something? Well, why aren't you going out and buying toilet paper now? I see plenty of it on the shelves.
Yeah.
People tend to go back to the exact.
An unfortunate fact of the matter is, I'm glad you brought this up. What do you do when you got to go, and sure you got the tickets, but you don't have a place to put the tickets? What would you do about digging a latrine? What are the basics? Are you just going to go buy a tree every time?
When Mrs. Paints Minis was pregnant with first or second son, I can't remember. If you've ever been around a pregnant woman, you know that when they gotta go, and they don't want to squat on a hole. A pregnant woman wants to go in a toilet, right? So again, I'm about comfort. I want to make things as close to home as possible. That's when I made her a bucket toilet. I made her a bucket commode, and I keep a bag of kitty litter in that bucket. Well, if it's good enough for cats, it's good enough for you. So I made her. I used a bucket, and I've got a big bag of kitty litter in it, and on that bucket, I've got two lids. One is a lid to put on the bucket when it's not being used, and the other is I took a bucket lid, I cut a hole out of it, I screwed a toilet seat to the bucket lid. You take the regular lid off, you put the bucket lid on. It's got a toilet. The toilet seat goes up and down. It's a 5-gallon bucket. It's just about the right height for most people to do their business on.
Yep.
And it's reusable. And then I bought a box of. It's all together in one kit. There's a box of trash bags that are the right size for the bucket, a bag of kitty litter, and so I put the trash bag in the bucket. I put the lid over it. Do your business. When it gets to be unbearable, you take that whole trash bag up and you bury it someplace.
Okay, that's what I was getting to next. Okay, first off, a question. What's the difference between the kitty litter and no kitty litter? You just got a bag of business.
Well, I don't want to deal with the liquid. You could use sand maybe, but I want something to absorb enough of that liquid so that when I pull the bag out, trash bags are almost never actually waterproof. How many times we pull the trash bag out of the garbage and whatever's wet at the bottom is just dripping out the bottom of the bag? I don't want to deal with that.
Okay. Now burying. You got to bury the bag.
You can burn it.
What about taking the same bucket but having a hole at the bottom of the bucket and placing the bucket over a hole in the ground?
how hard is the ground where you live? I
Rock hard,
grew up,
actually.
I grew up in such a desert, or I grew up in Arizona. The ground was so hard that without a pickaxe and all day, you couldn't dig more than about 2 or 3 inches down before you hit basically solid rock. You know,
Right.
to dig a hole a foot deep, the hole be 4 or 5 feet wide for pulling out all the giant rocks. Um,
Mhm.
it really depends on what kind of topsoil you have and conserving energy. I mean, do I want to dig a hole if I don't have to? I don't want to dig a hole if I don't have
Obviously
to.
not. I do have places, believe it or not. Um, I live in the desert, but there are places where the ground isn't as rock hard as others. There are some places I've scoped out that I can do that, but there's also parks. Believe it or not, if there's grass, then it's going to be easier to dig through.
Okay, that's true.
You
Um,
know, and to be honest, I could almost see, depending on what's going on and how bad the area is and everything, going to a park or a empty lot or something like that to do those things. Okay, everybody, it's time to go to the bathroom. We're all going to go to the bathroom. You know, and go to a location to do so that your property isn't starting to reek.
you ever try to make a little kid hold it?
Uh, yeah, that's peeing. That's kind of different because you can always just do what my dog does and water the lawn.
No, I understand that. I just
But yeah, when you gotta uh,
little kids aren't very good at regulating
no, not
their
even a little.
urges. So, I mean, again, this is the thing. You have to consider the composition of your party, gamers. Who's in your party? You got is grandma in your party? Is Junior in your party? Do you have an infant in your party? Do you have teenagers in your party? Do you have anyone who has a chronic illness in your party? These
Mhm.
are things that you have. Preparation must be a personal experience, and what works for us probably won't work for you, which is why I've always been against taking the checklist approach to preparations. If you take a checklist approach, you will miss something. I've always recommended an individualized approach based on
Well, then
specific
you mean
steps.
then you mean an individual checklist
No,
as opposed
well,
to a prefect.
kind of, but again, yeah, your checklist, not FEMA's
Right.
checklist, not the Red Cross's checklist, not the
Because
Boy
I
Scouts
have a
checklist.
I have a checklist that I did not write. It's on my refrigerator, but that's more of uh, a reminder to the other people who live here. These are things you need to think about. And because mostly I've gotten almost everything on that list, and that was, those were no-brainer items for me that I didn't need the list for. But there were a couple items on the list that I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. I should grab this or that, and eventually did grab this or that, and except for the few things, like I said, that I haven't picked up. But yeah, I know Raven doesn't like making lists, but I think this is the one time you guys can make an exception. You know, get that pad of paper out, and because there's going to be things you need on that list that nobody else in the world would even think about. There may be that one snack food or that one kind of canned beverage. Um, that when you put it on your checklist, it means the world. Somebody else, like that Kit Kat bar, I might be willing to trade that off for, a pound of rice, or what have you. Just because for me, it's, a priority. I'd rather have the rice because I got mouths to feed. That Kit Kat bar, it isn't going to go very far. Even if I break off a piece and hand it to Justin, there's, how many other people are going to be like, well, where's my piece, But, I got a pound of rice. Nobody's going to say, where's my scoop of rice? They know it's coming.
All right. So here are things to consider. I want you to consider hand tools, not hammers and nails, but kitchen tools. I want you to consider having things like a couple of good cast iron skillets, hand mill, so you can grind your wheat. Can you grind your wheat and make flour when there's no power? One hand mill is good. Two hand mills is better. They usually cost about $100 for a good one.
One is none, two is one.
So I want you to have a hand mill. You can't make rice. Pardon me. You can't turn your wheat into rice. Pardon me, into flour without a hand mill. Kerosene.
Good knives and sharpening tools.
Yeah, good things that you normally use to cook. Cash. Always big on cash. Junk silver. At least 1,000 rounds of ammunition. 10,000 is better. You're going to need either the means or have on hand at least 2,000 gallons of water. That's a lot of water. Again, we talked about that, 7 pounds a gallon. So where are you going to put 15,000 pounds of water?
Yeah, how many cubic feet do you think that is?
Well, I figured a gallon is pretty close. You know how big a gallon of milk is. Now imagine, 2,000 of those. At this point, most preparations is about storage. Coffee, cake, and cat food. Coffee cake? Well, can't you make a coffee cake? Can you cook without butter? Can you make a cake right now without butter? A lot of Depression era cookbooks out there where cooking food is really, really simplified. Sugar, honey and sugar. Sugar actually does store pretty well, especially in those Mylar bags. I definitely recommend storing as much sugar and as much honey as you can possibly get away with, because
it not only honey never goes bad.
Well,
honey is immoral.
I want to make things. I want to be comfortable. I'm not trying to live like a Mad Max. Said I want to be the guy that
cue the Tom Petty music.
I want to be the guy that pops open the that cooks a full meal and then goes downstairs and pops in a DVD afterwards. You could consider natural gas or propane powered generators, because historically natural gas lasts a lot. Pardon me. The natural gas service is more robust and stable than electricity. You hear about electricity going out. When was the last time you heard about somebody's gas going out?
I honestly can't think of it an instance
where somebody lost their gas, unless there was an earthquake and a break in a gas main.
Right.
So what I would recommend, looking at dual fuel generators, ones that easily run on both natural gas and propane.
Raven's got a question for us. She has an old cistern on the property. Would that be a good place to store items?
Above ground or below ground? And shouldn't you just store water in it? That's what a cistern is for. If I had a cistern, I'd have that thing filled to the brim with potable water, assuming it doesn't leak, and assuming you can get the water back out of it.
Yeah. Bucket, rope, winch.
Um, car tools,
Below ground system.
car preps are a whole different show. I do have a bunch of stuff on what you should keep in your car. Um,
Provided
but I
you can keep it running.
well, no, yeah, exactly. Extra belts, hand tools,
Spare tires,
spare
fix a
tires,
flat,
good
jumper
jack,
cable.
uh, a hand winch. You know, like a come along. A hand winch will do you a lot of good,
Of
actually.
course, the first aid kit, flashlight, flares, etc.
Yeah, and then with the first aid kit, remember that your cars tend to get really hot, so things in your first aid kit tend to break down a lot faster, and probably need to be
Mm-hmm.
replaced at least once a year, depending on how hot it is where you live.
Yeah, those rubber gloves aren't going to do a bit of good after about a couple of months.
A below ground cistern. Okay, Raven, can you store water in it? Can you pump it full of water right now? I mean, if I had 1,000 gallon below ground cistern on my property, I would definitely use it. How far below ground is it? It's below ground. Could you? A lot of folks in on the Gulf Coast build shelters, like storm shelters, that are like half below ground, half above ground. Could you mound dirt on top of it and turn it into a temporary shelter? If you could actually get inside of it, I mean, how big is it? Big enough to sit in? Is it big enough to stand in? How close are you to any kind of disasters where you might need such a thing? But if it was something like the size of a Connex and it was below ground, and can you easily access it? You know, does it have a hatchway from above that you can get into? I would definitely be using it for storage, though, of some kind. Can you control the humidity in it?
She
Can
says
you
it's
put like,
huge.
it's huge? Um, yeah. Is it if does it rust? If I put something metal in there and see if it rusts, uh, there are
Is
things
it
you
in a
can do
place
to
prone
control
prone
humidity.
to floods? Good one.
Yeah, exactly. Prone to floods. That's why I asked about rust. I've seen steel cans rust out pretty quick. Even cans. This is why I'm sort of a bigger fan of plastics now than steel cans because they don't rust. I want to learn more about this cistern, though. I'm really intrigued.
Well, it's probably haunted, so there's that.
Bring some sage and burn some sage bundles. Make friends with the ghosts.
The hatch is a big rock they push over the top. Can you
That's
push
kind
the
of,
rock?
yeah. If you were inside of it, could you move the rock? Could you replace the rock
Or is
with the
that just
door?
too?
Could you build a hatch for it? And who else knows about this cistern? That's another question.
She says
Could
she's
you put
not far from the Mississippi River.
Oh, but not far from the Mississippi River, so it might actually be close to the water table already. But so you probably don't need a lot of water storage if you're already close to the Mississippi River. I'm sure there are streams and tributaries nearby that have clean-ish water, cleaner water. Um, but I'm actually a pretty big fan of storing things underground if possible. I wish I could do it more easily here. I'm thinking about it. Honestly, though, I think my next big ticket item is going to be a dual fuel generator. I've got the money saved up. I've got the space for it. I've just got to convince Mrs. Paints Minis that it's in her best interest to do it.
Mm-hmm. What about solar generators?
What are you trying to power? A radio? I'm thinking about powering my whole house.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think a solar generator. I think it'd be kind of hard. I don't like solar, but that's more of a personal thing than a practical thing. I don't like solar power because I've done the math, and solar panels can never make more energy than it costs to produce the solar panels.
except
It
on the
costs,
longest
it
term scales.
costs, well, it costs energy, right? I'm talking about joules of energy. It costs a lot of energy. They burn fossil fuels to make solar panels. And
Right.
then the solar panels are only good for about 10 to 15 years. And then they're junk. So they're a trap in terms of energy production. And again, and even with regardless, you have to have a way to store that energy, both solar and generated energy. So you typically have to have an inverter with a battery with a deep cycle battery bank.
Right.
Whether you make it with,
I go to Harbor Freight pretty often, and they've got the batteries, the panels, the cables, the whole bit. Now they're not cheap, by any stretch of the imagination. Um, but I look at the noise and the fuel requirements for gas generators. Having a gas generator going, in a neighborhood that's deathly quiet because nothing else is going.
I think you'd have to have two things to make it work, Shadow. I think first you'd have to have. I don't recommend gasoline. I usually, like I said, dual fuel propane. Plus, propane
Mm-hmm.
lasts forever.
Mm-hmm.
Propane in a tank will last as long as the tank does. It doesn't
Right.
break down with time. So, two things. One, you need to have it inside of a shed. And two, you have to put a literal car muffler on the exhaust pipe of the generator.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you put it inside of a shed and if you put a muffler on it, I think you can get it pretty quiet.
Okay. She says it looks like the cistern is lined with concrete.
Yeah. Well, is it damp inside of it? Go and check it out. If it's not damp, if it's dry, I would put down wood pallets inside of it and then use it to store either dry goods that I didn't things that needed to be kept dry, cool, and dark, like 5 gallon buckets of wheat. I probably wouldn't use anything that was steel because, again, for fear of rust.
Mm-hmm.
Long term preps, maybe extra tools or something like that. But I would really be concerned with rusting. Try it, see what happens. Get back to us. Let us know.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear, its internal measurements as well.
It's
That
an
way you
asset.
can start. Pardon me?
It's an asset, though.
Right.
It's not a liability. What liability is it? It's not costing you any money. It's not costing you anything in maintenance right now. It's just sitting there on a property. So my only question is, who goes snooping around there? Is there any way to secure it? And how wet is it? If you can answer adequately for all those things, heck yeah, I'd put it to use.
Yeah, and with the rock, can you actually move that rock by yourself to cover it up? Otherwise, you're gonna have to come up with something else like a fake tree or bush and just camouflage it if that's your intention.
Actually, Shadow, I think I would want a rock that's so heavy that one person couldn't pick it up, and then I would hide a steel pry bar, a big one. I would hide that somewhere around so that I could use the lever to pick the rock up. I mean, if it had like a 500-pound rock on it, that'd be awesome because then I know that it wouldn't be easy for Joe Schmuckatelli to go and pick the rock up and move it. But
Right.
if I had a big steel pry bar at my house that I could carry over there and then use the pry bar to lift the rock up out of the way, I'd be better. Just something to think about.
And practice doing so that you know how to do it, so that in an emergency you're not struggling and going, and wasting crap tons of calories trying to move it in frustration because that whole frustration factor will help you burn a lot of calories when you're not ready to. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned redundancy already. What if Raven only used that place to store redundant preps?
Mhm.
and then it wouldn't be an emergency to go over there and get it. If you'd stored, I don't know, extra flashlight batteries, just as an example, whatever it is that you don't need right away. And then, on a Sunday afternoon, when you're feeling good and rested, you can walk over there with your party and, open it up, make sure no one sees you do it, right?
Right. Cover of darkness or what have you.
But then, if redundancy is a big thing. I had a buddy who was big into this game. He was with the local special forces group here in town, and he always stored his redundant preparations off property, like outside of his house, because we were worried about earthquakes. And he had backpacks packed and ready to go in a shed at the back of his property. Could you rent a storage unit to store additional preparations? One of those storage sites, preferably one of the ones that are climate controlled. Could you store things? Is there a farmer nearby where you could park like a travel trailer? If you had a travel trailer with stuff in it, could you leave it parked? You'd go to some local rancher or farmer, say, hey, can I give you $50 a month just to park my camp trailer on your property?
Right.
I think that's an option for a lot of people, especially depending on where you live.
And bolt cutters. If you're going to do some of those things, if you're going to store your stuff in a storage unit, the staff is not going to be there after a certain point. They're just going to give up the ghost and hit the road. And getting back into your storage unit, well, you're probably going to need a pair of bolt cutters to get in to your own storage unit.
Well, I think that the storage units to be rifled. Bad guys will come long before then. But I'm talking about short term, mid-term preparations. If you're storing stuff for that whole 1 month, 2 month thing, and we're talking about that's a lot of space. It's a lot of stuff, and most of us just flat out don't have the space. But there are ways to find space. If you know somebody that has a spot of land and that you trust them, you can park your stuff, whether it's something like a shed or access to a barn, things that you could store off site. If you're worried about something like an earthquake coming in and damaging your property to the point where you need things stored, redundant preps stored off your own property. What kinds of things are we considering?
Right, and can you get to and from the offsite location safely and without drawing a lot of attention? If you're unloading 5-gallon bottles of water, people are going to notice that in that kind of situation. When you first start loading the stuff in there, they're probably not going to think much about it, but later on they may remember, hey, I remember them putting water or big old bags of beans in their storage unit. The people who run the storage unit or people just happen to be near where you're storing off site may remember that when you don't want them to.
So how paranoid are you? And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense.
No, not at all.
I mean, and how willing are you? I mean, are you putting your stuff away in secret now? I mean, how many folks? I'm of the belief that most folks in your neighborhood don't pay attention to anything, because most folks don't pay attention to anything.
Right.
They're too
You'd
busy.
be amazed how unaware people are these days, especially with a cell phone in hand type of mentality.
So, and So you have to just ask yourself. You just ask yourself a whole bunch of questions. I said, make your threat matrix. Think about what's the most likely thing to happen to you. Wind turbines. Wind turbines are the same as solar generators. They take more energy to make than you can ever get out of them. It's a farce, but it's one that we all bought into. It takes thousands and thousands of joules of energy to melt to make all that steel, and you only get about 10 years worth of juice out of it.
Yeah, I've literally got, as far as the eye can see, there are wind turbines that light up at night, which are wasting the freaking energy that they're making to let you know that they're off in the distance. I never understood that.
From flying into them.
Oh, but where they're located, um, there's like a kind of like mountains right behind them. You know what I mean? So the plane's going to hit the mountains before it hits the turbines.
The law is the law. Got to follow the law.
Yeah, don't you know? The carbon footprint to produce them is ridiculous, says Mac. Yeah, absolutely. It's on paper, someone thought it looked good, and that was enough to push it through. And thankfully, I don't have to have one on my property. Although where I live, it's windy enough to where a small one wouldn't be a bad thing, but it would probably irritate the neighbors to no end.
So what I want all of our viewers to do this week, their homework assignment, is to make a list of their most common fears and threats, the common stuff, the stuff that could really happen. And then I want you to focus especially on things that can cause you to be without means for 6 months or more, right? Losing your job. We can have a really serious, really serious economic downturn. I believe. And then if you're without work for 6 months, what are you going to do? How are you going to get by? Power's still on. You can still get anything you want, but you don't have money. Yeah, it depends on where your water table is. Some folks, their water table. If you're on well water, definitely. If you're on well water, you should have a windmill and a hand pump both. But most folks aren't on well water. Let me see. So you're out without. Start saving money. Honestly, get out of debt. People in this country are under crushing debt. I think that there are 3 kinds of debt that you can have, right? You can have a mortgage, you can have a car loan, or you can have student loans that you're working on, and any combination of the 3. But we get caught up with consumer debt, and our consumer debt is killing us. Number one, get out of debt. Number 2, build up your savings. Try to get in a situation where you can save between 10 and 20% of your paycheck every week. Right? If you can put 10% of your paycheck in a 401k, especially if your employer has matching, a Roth, a tax, a post-tax IRA, like if your company will match 6 or 7 or 8% of your contributions, that's free money that you're throwing away. If you put 6% of your post-tax paycheck in a 401k and your employer puts 6% of your post-tax income in a 401k, that's free money. That's money that you can use in an emergency because you can borrow against or even remove the money you've contributed in most cases. You can't take the company's money out without incurring a huge tax penalty. But that's, in an emergency, that money is available. Have some cash. We talked about that last show. At least $1,000.
I took your advice, and from now on, every time, I only go shopping once a week. But when I'm done, I take all the ones from using 20s, because I'll use a 20 even if I have the 1s and the 5s and the 10s in my
Sure.
wallet. I'll take all. I'm taking all the ones, putting them away till I have a nice big fat stack of $1 bills to replace, a couple of the $100 bills.
Sure.
Just because, like you said, being able to pay, exact change when, there's no ATMs and there's no registers working, your debit card readers.
Right.
I'm definitely going to be able to pay in cash.
Right. So have some cash, pay off your debt. This is some of your soundest long-term prep advice. Don't spend money you don't have on preparations. We talked about some pretty expensive stuff today. We talked about some inexpensive stuff today. Bulk rice, bulk beans, bulk barley, bulk rye, bulk beans, pinto beans, black beans, great northern beans, white beans. Those are all fairly inexpensive. Typically, there are usually 2 or 3 different kinds of hippie grocery stores. If you stay away from the high-end hippie grocery store and go to the more co-op-y, patchouli smelling type hippie grocery stores, you can usually get that stuff pretty cheap. Um, less than $1 a pound for sure. For maybe even 50 cents a pound or less. I don't know. I haven't
Don't
bought.
forget your pasta. Don't forget your pasta. Pasta will
Pasta
last
doesn't
for
store
forever.
long term though. Pasta's good for middle term for sure. Same thing with flour. Flour doesn't store very well. You can store it for a month or 2 months, but I remember
I
to
heard
rotate.
pasta was like really long term.
Rotate it. No, it'll get maybe if it's stored in airtight containers. Store it in like number 10 cans.
I
You
heard
can
even
get
in like when you buy a bag of spaghetti, even in that, I was informed that if it's airtight, it's going to last a good long time.
Is it airtight though?
All you have to do is squeeze the bag, and if it still stays, you know, the air that's in it is still, keeping it from
No.
popping or leaking.
I still wouldn't consider it a good prep for more than a year. I mean, it's going to get stale. Do you want to eat it? I guess you could, but I'm talking about thriving. I'm talking about maintaining the highest possible level of comfort in a disaster. So yeah, I mean, if you buy it, rotate it, right? I don't know how often you eat pasta in your house. I probably eat it maybe 3 times a month, 4 times a month, which I guess is
Once a
still a
week,
lot.
guaranteed.
But
Um,
buy what you eat what you store, and rotate it. I think that's
mhm.
the number one thing.
I do know for a fact though that cup of noodles, like the styrofoam cups, and even the ramen does not age well.
Right.
It really really doesn't.
And
If you
ramen is
have
still
any
super
ramen
cheap.
or if you have any of those items in your storage, I would recommend making them basically using them up until they're gone, and to supplement using that money to purchase other things. Just get that out of your head, unless you really like it and it's a regular thing you eat, like
I was
max as possible last uncooked will last 5 to 7 years.
it depends on your environment. How humid is it? Again, um, pasta. No, ramen for sure. Ramen. I was just at Costco yesterday at the Costco here. Ramen was still about like 8 cents a pack or 10 cents a pack. It's still super cheap, but it's one of
You're
those
kidding.
things that I recommended. It's one of those things that I promised when I got married I would never voluntarily put into my body ever again because I ate it a lot when I was single.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And I think
it's like 10 times that price here in California.
even at Costco, it's $1 a pack.
It's like 80 cents a cup.
No, I meant the wafer ones.
I'm not sure about those, but even those, it's like $5 for like I think it's 12 packs.
Right. It, but no, I was talking about the cases of them at like Sam's Club or Costco.
Okay, yeah, I'll look, but I'm not, I'm not, I'm not buying them ever again.
Well,
Unless Jackie just says, "Hey, can we get because he does like them. It's a quick, filling kind of meal that he can. Max says ramen and spam lasts a long time, but tastes like. Actually, we the family here loves uh, spam and eggs. Um, we only do it a couple of times a month, if that. But on a breakfast sandwich or mixed in with scrambled eggs, we're gonna have spam. Always. Dozens of cans of it, just because. Yeah, and lentils are really good. I can't stand them, but if that's what's for dinner, then I guess that's what I'm eating. But I'm not gonna buy it,
lentils.
so it's not gonna be what.
The thing I like about lentils is because they're so small, they cook very quickly.
Right.
Beans take hours and hours to cook, but you can cook lentils even on a regular cast iron skillet in like less than an hour.
Yeah,
So
I don't like beans just because of the water consumption. Because you have to continually add water as it cooks down for something that I'd rather go with the refried beans in a can if uh, that way all I have to do, I don't even have to heat it up literally. I mean, I can eat it right out of the can,
well,
and
here's the trick then. Just a tip, an easy tip. Beans, by definition, cooked in a pressure cooker, retain all that water. The water doesn't escape because it's under pressure.
but you need
So
those are that's an electric appliance, correct?
no, not
Or
the
no?
old-fashioned ones. They cook on a
Oh,
stovetop.
okay, okay.
But even the electric ones, I mean, again, are you need to be prepared to have power and prepared to not have power.
Right, right. I always assume that there won't be any, just because it's the easiest assumption to make for especially in short-term situations. Power going down is one of the first things in our country to go down. It may be a temporary thing, but we have power outages in this country every month of the year in different locations, depending on where you
Okay.
are.
Well,
And
my
so I just
town,
assume.
my city literally has its own power company.
Mhm.
It's we're on city power, and the power here has never gone down since I've lived here for longer than about 30 seconds.
Gotcha.
So again, you got to build your threat matrix. You
Right,
talked about
California is signed a suicide pact on all the infrastructure. I don't know what's going on, but wow.
yeah, that's true. California's been dealing with rolling brownouts of a Cold War communist era scale in some places.
Right. We
It's like,
literally have
like
power
North Korea.
outages, water outages, gas outages on a almost regular basis, and it's all intentional. So I've literally, and I live in the desert, so uh, it's not one of the friendliest of environments. There's, it's getting better, but it's always going to be a desert. So I'm always going to have the heat, which is a really, when people talk about heat and they're talking about 90 degrees, that's mildly uncomfortable when you get used to it to a certain point. But when you're looking at 110, 120 degrees, that's killing everything around you. Slowly but surely. I couldn't even grow tomatoes outdoors this year. I've got them growing indoors, and had I tried otherwise, they wouldn't have made it past the 1 foot tall mark, and they would have just shriveled up and died.
Right,
But believe it or not, this year we've had a really mild summer, which to me forebodes a really cold winter,
right,
which is for some folks easier to tolerate.
sure,
But we don't actually have an abundance of trees. We have trees, but they're not dropping firewood, or kindling
right,
anytime soon, which is a shame.
right. I understand. I really do. And that's hopefully you'll have a wet winter then if you have a mild summer. I'm praying that everybody has a wet winter this year, especially in the West.
Yeah, we could use it. Last year was brutal. The drought conditions we had were I'd never seen anything like it. Uh, ordinances against watering your lawn and things like that. But then this year, nothing. We had a maximum heat day here at 109 one day, and now it's just barely August, and I need a sweater to go out at night. So that to me says we're gonna probably have a pretty wet, if not wet, at least cold winter, and that for most of the country, that's actually not going to be a bad thing.
Yeah. I'm really, really hoping for because we've had a drought here for years and we had a really wet winter, but we had a fairly dry summer so far, which is bad. But I was with everybody says that we're going to need 2 or 3 winters, just like the one we had last winter, to actually break this drought. That's something to consider too. Again, when you
Fingers
talk about
crossed.
water,
Yeah,
prolonged
that's one
drought.
of the things you have to. That's almost guaranteed number two on the threat matrix list. The unemployment being first because that could happen at any time to anybody for any number of reasons, and you know if you're prepped and ready to go, at least your groceries aren't going to be a drain on you. Because this is one of the things we do prep for. Having a couple of weeks to months of food in storage, on your property or what have you, will allow you to not have to go to the grocery store. And with us, we have a $600-800 a month grocery bill. Mind you, some of that is actually prep, but if you can just go into your closet and say, okay, well, this week we're eating canned this, canned that, rice, etc. Other than the fresh fruits and veggies and maybe milk, that kind of thing. Then you don't need to go to the store. That can save you $200 or more per
Right.
week until you do get another job and you have to go through the 2 week, holding back your first paycheck. There's a
Right.
month right there. You may lose a job and have one lined up, but if you've got that 2 weeks without a paycheck, what are you going to do? You're obviously going to have to pay your rent and your utilities first. And
Exactly.
if that doesn't leave anything for food, well, lucky you, you've got a closet full of it.
And that's
And
my most realistic scenario.
Crafting says, hey, Shadow, if you're going to have a cold, wet winter, does that mean you need to change your name to Snowman and Son? Hell no. I hate snow more than I hate any other weather phenomenon. I despise it. I used to have to plow through it. Well, ice, really, not snow, up in Lake Elsinore. Just brutal, and my body is just not built for cold weather. I've spent most of my time in the tropics or California, and I just cold weather just gets me. 40 degrees and lower, I'm hibernating. I'm going to eat, I'm going to sleep, and that's about all you're going to get out of me.
Uh, I am, yeah, thinking when I think about preparations, those are the things that come to my mind. I try to encourage people to think about realistic preps and to
Right.
take and to be slow. Don't go into debt to make preps. Um,
Yeah.
don't
Yeah. Yeah.
if you again if losing your job is your number one long term prep consideration, then you should think about things like having a month's worth of liquidity on hand.
Yeah.
Whether it's in not necessarily cash because you'll still be able to go to the bank and maybe not even in your checking account, but if you have a month's worth of money and it's liquid enough that you can get at it if you need to pay your mortgage
Mm-hmm.
and pay all of your bills, then I think that you're way ahead of most Americans.
Right.
Way.
Speaking of money, I talked about the $1 bills, but I didn't talk about the change. for the past couple of years, every coin I get, I even if I'm at the store and I got a pocket full of change because I've made a couple other purchases at other stores, I don't give them exact change. I want your coins. I don't just want the $1 bills now. Oh, I've wanted the coins ever since they started saying there was a coin shortage, which is ridiculous unless millions of people like me are saving all their coins for their coin collection and or emergency situations. Um, I've managed to, I've got several $100s now in coins. One container just of quarters, one container just of pennies, and then nickels and dimes in the other one. And just check your couch cushions, whatever. Every time you go somewhere and you get coins, just put them in. Start with just putting them in one container until that container's full. Then you can get other containers and separate them by denomination, because there may be times where they won't even take the paper money. It's like, no, we can't take your $20 bills because we can't make change. Well, okay, I'll pay exactly in coins or ones. And worst case scenario, when they go to digital currency, maybe people will actually be collectors of coins, or maybe they'll be worth more money for some dumb reason. You can always go through your coins, looking for the rare ones, because sometimes they're out there. For whatever reasons, I've come across some, silver quarters and things like that, and because people just don't even know. They, most people, we can actually hear that. Somebody hands, the sound difference between a standard quarter and something
Yeah, I picked up a few over the years in change, especially when I could actually see them in the in the drawer, or see when my sister worked for, when she was in school, she worked as a cashier at a convenience store, and she even had people every once in a while bring in things like Morgan dollars, because they just you're desperate, or tweakers stealing from somebody and then spend them as buy a bag of chips.
Not even realizing what they were. Yeah, my younger brother did that with my dad's coin collection. One 4th of July, he just went and raided it and bought fireworks with it, and yeah, boy did we both catch hell for it, because I got blamed for it, even though I had nothing to do with it. I was like, hey, I actually enjoyed looking at the old coins and putting new ones in the folders and stuff. And there will be a point where things like that will come back. They will make a resurgence in the collector's market. Right now, all people talk about are gold and silver, because of the actual value on
Spot price.
for emergency, not like living in comfort, being able to have a coin or a stamp collection. Although I don't recommend stamps, I never will, never have. That's just not a good investment of time or money. But your coins, you never know. You might even be able to do other things with them, use them as other commodities or tools. Drill holes through to make washers, or sinkers for fishing.
Freaking those zinc pennies, man. Those zinc pennies are so freaking worthless that I have literally used. Zinc pennies. I use those as weights in the bottom of my plastic minis.
Yep. I know lots of people who use them as miniature bases. And I've also, because a quarter is actually cheaper than like a 20 mil base, and it's plastic.
Right.
So, and I bought miniatures on eBay that when I got them, in my hot little hands, I'm like, oh my God, these bases are pennies, or nickels or dimes. I'm like, well, I'm throwing them in the goop to remove the paint. I might as well remove the bases too, and just check the date. You never know what you're going to find.
I did find a company on eBay who's got the knockoff Games Workshop bases, and they sold for like 8 or 9 cents a piece. So
that's
those
cool.
are the ones I've been buying. But they don't have any 32 mil bases. They only had no, pardon me. They did have 32 mil. I really like the Renedra flat bases, off topic, but Renedra does not make a round 32 mil base. Makes me upset. They make a
Yeah,
square 32 base, but not a round one. And
crafting.
those are
I don't
the
think you
best
can use
bases.
quarters and a shotgun. Nickels and dimes maybe, but I don't think unless you've got an elephant gun, I don't think you can. I don't think quarters are small enough, even in a
If
12
you
gauge.
if you're hand loading, I mean, if I mean, unless you're hand loading shotgun shells, and
Right,
I don't know many people that do hand load shotgun shells. Hand loading shotgun shells requires a lot of effort as opposed to
right.
reloading or
Yeah,
hand loading metallic cartridges. Um, and that's a different animal. Like the shotgun shells that I like have not been readily available since before COVID, since right when COVID hit. Right when COVID hit, I got online and I bought several. And not, I didn't buy any cases or anything, but I bought as much as I could afford, and I have not seen them really for sale since then. It's really
uh,
weird.
agreed, Mac. Yeah, I have more shotgun shells than I have any other rounds. Yeah, I try to do the reloading thing as well, but primers are just non-existent right now. I
They're
cannot
coming
find
back.
them. Pardon?
And you've got to be able. Well, you've got to be able to. You've got to be willing to um, use. I don't know what math. I got a buddy who you know figured out which primers will make do with which shells as like non-listed, right? Using like large handgun primers for everything, or or small rifle primers for everything, you know,
Mm-hmm.
outside their intended and labeled purpose. But I'm not. My dad was a hand loader.
Mm-hmm. Mine
Now,
too.
I'm not a hand loader because it's just one more. It's one more hobby.
It really is. Now there are some reloading kits that are like it's got everything, but for the price uh, versus the output, you'd be better off just stocking up. And most ammo will last a good long time. If you rotate it, you're even better
Forever.
off. Yeah,
Just you just
you
need to
know.
make sure again that it's stored properly,
Yep.
so it doesn't. So it doesn't. So the oil will negatively affect primers, and high humidity will eventually negatively affect brass.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got ammunition that I put away 25 years ago, and it's all in the original boxes, and it was already packed for long-term storage anyway. So the problem is that you need ammunition to train, not just to use for hunting or other scenarios. Fortunately, training ammunition in most calibers is still available. You will pay for it. You
Mm-hmm.
will pay, the days of cheap ammunition are long past. But if you take a class and the cost of the tuition is $900 and you need another $200 of ammunition for it, and you need to buy gasoline to and from, or heaven forbid airfare to and from, plus meals, plus
Lodging.
gasoline, yeah, lodging. Yeah, if you've got to get a hotel room, now you have to bake that into the cost of training.
Right.
And I
And,
do
and,
recommend training.
speaking of training, I'm glad you brought that up. Right off the bat, uh, especially amongst the gaming community, and I'm guilty as charged as well. Uh, getting fit is one of the best preps you can ever do. If uh, can't walk a mile without needing a break, then you aren't ready, not even close.
And
If you're lugging around 50, 100 extra pounds, um, right off the bat, you're probably you've probably put your metabolism at the point where you don't even feel functional without 50% more calories than the average person needs at your height's ideal weight. If you can get down to only having uh, a couple dozen extra pounds on your frame, you'll find out how, as time goes by, your daily requirement, it becomes less and lower and lower, to the point where you can get to the point where you're actually at a deficit always, even though you're at, like, let's say, your ideal weight. Then you've already conditioned yourself to live in a prepper situation without discomfort, which means that when everybody else is losing their shit and panicking and what have you, you'll be able to even step it down a little further to be at their level, but at the same time you'll be at a 40% calorie deficit than you would normally, but the discomfort level will be less. Being able to endure only one meal a day. I mean, most people can't even contemplate that, let alone going 8 hours without a snack, like a certain congressman, and making a big ass deal about it. If you can go knock it down to 2 meals a day, you're on the right path. You are, you're ready to be one of the people that's going to flourish during these situations. Your daily requirements. I'm not even going to go into water, because that's there's people out there that can do it, but most people, they're going to need way more than that gallon a day just to drink,
Sure.
just to feel normal.
I don't recommend that. I don't recommend skimping on water.
Yeah, because then you really quickly start to make mistakes because you're not thinking properly. And just for the record, trying to stock up on cans of soda, not really, not a good idea. Or 2 liter bottles of that stuff. You're going to actually need to. I know this is going to hurt people, but living without caffeine and coffee and what have you, that's going to be a hard one. But if you can actually do that, you're going to be at a benefit, because as soon as you have to go without that, you're going to get the headaches. And I went through it. And if you have to go through that on top of everything else in a situation like this, where, if you don't get X number of cups of coffee a day, you're going to start getting headaches. Well, you're also going to start thinking, irrationally, and burning more calories because you're going through the withdrawals, and thinking, erratically, as well as, just not at your optimum performance,
Right.
because of the headaches. If you've got a headache all day, you're going to be tempted to take those aspirin all day that you may actually really need later on down the road, when there's some actual pain involved, some sort of physical issue, and you've been taking the aspirin every day for 2 weeks to get rid of the headaches. I'd recommend, cutting down versus going cold turkey, just like with anything.
Right.
Cut down, lessen the caffeine intake, but still push yourself to the same activities, so that, when that comes around, you're not, all fidgety, going through withdrawals or whatever, because you'll also be cutting out probably the sugar and the cream and all that other stuff. And, if you're a Starbucks person and you're doing it 2 or 3 times a day, well, then you're also saving, $5 to $20 a day, which adds up, over the weeks, etc. And if you absolutely have to do coffee, by all means, learn to make your own. The cheapest way that's tolerable and enjoyable. And if you can't do that, then stock the hell up, and good luck. Because coffee will last a good long time if it's sealed, and doesn't
Especially
take up.
green beans. Green beans will store for a very. I don't drink coffee, but I do know that green coffee beans store very well. And then you can actually roast them yourself and grind them yourself. You mentioned, to put it another way, you made a very good point. And to make it a little more succinct, I will remind people that people lose weight in the kitchen, not the gym.
Yeah.
When you want to lose weight, you don't lose weight at the gym. at the gym is a place to go to get stronger, to work on skills.
Enduring.
Join a boxing gym, join an MMA gym, pick up some skills while you're working out. Get some, if you want to do weights, get some kettlebells, do some calisthenics. And watch what you eat. Most Americans, I think, if you'd probably lose 15 pounds really quick if you just cut out the sugar. Not even all the sugar, just like you said, cut out the soda. If you cut out the soda, the weight's going to melt. You're going to lose weight. You're going to lose weight.
Absolutely. Yeah,
then,
when I did that, that was I want to say about 7 years ago. I cut out everything but water, which little did I know it was one of the best prepper moves I could have made, because there's going to come a point where soda and coffee and even milk, those are going to be luxuries, and while everybody else is suffering, having to just only drink water, that's one thing off my stress meter that I don't ever have to worry about again.
right.
Water. Oh, thank you. Not only water. You know what? No, it's one of the best things you can do for yourself. The more water you drink, the more back to nature you can get, so to speak, and you're not putting in any of those chemicals. I know tea and coffee, there's none of that, but caffeine is technically a drug, and it makes you do things differently than what?
It's the best drug. Best.
But it makes you perform and do things at a different level than you can do naturally on your own. You need to be able to understand what you can do without any of that. What are your limits? What can you accomplish in a day without coffee, without sugar? I know even without cigarettes. Yeah, I'm going to be killing people when I get to that point. But
it's not what you can do in a day, Shadow. It's what you can do in a night. Ask those night shift dwellers. What their caffeine is for. They'll tell you what their caffeine is for. The caffeine is that's their night shift fuel.
Right, and you know what? That may be a great commodity. It's like, okay, well, if you do the night shift, then you get coffee. You don't do the night shift, you don't get coffee. In your circle of friends, when you're trying to make sure that people aren't going crazy in your neighborhood, it's like, okay, well, I have coffee, but I'm only giving it, and I'll make it, but I'm only giving it out to the people who are doing the night shift, because maybe that's what it's going to take. You may have to get people who aren't regularly night owls to start doing that duty, to be the night watchman for your town or your neighborhood. Well, they get the coffee, nobody else needs it, or when it comes to hardcore rationing.
I had a glitch.
But yeah, getting in shape is one of the best prepper things you can do. How far can you walk? How far can you run? How long can you stay up without sleep? You may have to do that. If you're the father figure of a family and you have to watch over everybody, how long can you stay up? Because you may never see your family again because you're doing night duty while they're all sleeping. I mean, you may see them, but you won't be interacting with them except good morning, good night, etc.
Welcome to my world.
Right. So, getting in shape, it can never be considered a bad thing. It's going to be a hard thing for some people, but it's never a bad thing.
Start low, go slow. If you need to see your doctor, see your doctor. If you need to get your heart checked out, get your heart checked out. Mm-hmm. Don't do things you can't do. No one's asking you to run a marathon right now.
No. And good point. You reminded me, if you have medications that you need to take, then talk to your doctor about, look, I need to have a month's worth of this or 2 months or whatever to make sure, if I can't get to the pharmacy, I'm okay. Or if there is no pharmacy because they were all shut down because, Walgreens and what have you have decided to move out of your neighborhood, tell your doctor, the pharmacy's going out of business. I need, X number of prescriptions filled so that, when I have to travel, 100 miles to get it filled, you know, I could wait a week if necessary, or a
Right.
month, or what have you. You know, find ways. There are online pharmacies that will sell certain prescriptions legally if you've got all the right paperwork and what have you, and you can get those prescriptions filled. Just so you have your heart medicine or your asthma medicine or your blood pressure medicine. For more than just until you see the doctor again. Let them know
Right.
it's like, hey, if you won't do it, I'll go elsewhere and I'll probably get a new doctor. I need, especially if it's not, on certain lists of medications where they can't do that because, reasons. But if it's just staying alive kind of medicine, your doctor should be on board with it. And if not, it's like, okay, well, it was nice knowing you.
Right.
I'm going to be getting a new doctor because you
But
don't understand.
if you are on those other medications, look to get healthy so that you don't need them as much,
Right,
especially
right.
chronic pain meds or anxiolytics. If you're
Yep,
taking an
yep.
anxiolytic because you have GAD or something like that, and you're taking 2 milligrams of Ativan a day, or something, or Klonopin, or lorazepam or something, you might need to look at getting a little bit more healthy, because in an emergency, that's only going to exacerbate your anxiety.
Yep.
So if you're taking anxiety medications now, how are things going to be when the power goes out for a month?
Yeah, you're going to want to, self medicate, without, knowing what the hell you're doing. And you need to resist that urge. And, if you can, get it to where you can, you know, use less, then use
And I
less.
just, you know, we're dealing with the cross section of the population that I do think, again, um, gamers tend to be a little bit more introverted, a little bit more anxious. Um,
And I hate to say it, but a little bit more self indulgent.
Maybe.
We are kind of spoiled. We are incredibly lucky and blessed to be in this hobby and get to do what we do, compared to, so many other hobbies that, Netflix and chill, that it requires nothing. And if that's your thing, cool. But I know from my experience, gamers, Max says a little, yeah, you get it. We, we, uh, we play pretty hard. We spend pretty hard on our hobbies, but one good thing about it is it's one of the few hobbies that actually is incredibly conducive to the prepper mentality. We understand, through gaming, survival skills and being careful and having the right supplies and the right equipment and all that stuff. They go hand in hand with one another. So let's learn and take a page from our hobby and actually, you know, not necessarily go looking for a dungeon to actually explore, but be prepared for just about any situation we can afford. And like I said before, even if you can only put $5 or $10 a week away for your prepper materials, you're already ahead of 90% of the population, even at $5 a week. Most people do not even think in their entire life about these situations. They just react and then freak out and do what they're told.
Right.
Let's not be those guys. Let's do the things. Look at it as going on an adventure. An epic quest of survival, of epic proportions, because we're taking care of our family, our friends, ourselves, whoever, so that if anything bad happens, we've gained some experience points that we can write down on our own personal character sheet. That we made it. We made all our saving throws. Here we are, and maybe maybe we level up because of the experience. Max says D&D, AD&D, sorry, made me a better human. I tend to agree with that. I've noticed that gamers, tend to be smarter, more clever, more creative than the average individual. No offense, we need you, muggles out there, doing the heavy lifting for us and doing the hard labor while, we figure out, our next plan of attack, so to speak, but yeah, we've all through the hobby experienced things other people won't. Now they weren't in real life, but in our brain, it's no different than the dreams that we have that we can't shake out of our head that we had when we were, 10 and 12 years old, and they stick with us. Well, these experiences at the table sort of equate, fractionally at least uh, compared to have done it in real life. Obviously, no one's ever really slayed a dragon, but we've got some skills and we've learned some things, some lessons that through the hobby that kind of do translate, if only percentages of compared to the real experience that allow us to think outside the box on a regular basis. Be surprised, if you were to take a gamer and a non-gamer and put them through hypothetical situations, which is something the military's been doing for a while now. Playing these mental war games, which are essentially role playing. How would you deal with this situation? How would you deal with that situation? If you were to take gamers with no military experience versus other people with no military experience and put them through these let's call them tests, these role playing military strategy tests, wargaming it, the gamers are going to get higher marks every time. They're going to come up with and see the different possible solutions, whereas your average Joe Schmo is not even going to have a clue and would only get it right if they guessed and got lucky. Thanks, Mac. Glad you enjoyed that. Yeah, being nerds and gamers, we learn quickly to check our six and look for unobvious dangers. Exactly. We've spent countless hours, if not years of our lives, putting ourselves through these hypothetical situations that, in some level, in some way, have to have paid off. Now, I know there's, a percentage of the gamers out there that probably didn't really learn the lessons. They just learned the you know to go through the motions, so to speak. But the longer term, the older gamers that have been doing it, especially in, let's say, harder systems or harder scenarios, probably really did take something away that's probably technically tangible when it comes to prepping and survival and hell, even just camping. You know, I bet your average gamer, who's never been camping would probably fare better, just doing the camping thing and actually enjoying it than other folks who've never camped and are looking at it with dreads, like, oh no, we're going camping, kind of mentality, um, just because of this hobby.
Camping.
Pardon?
I said camping. Camping is
You like?
no camping is LARPing as a hobo.
Uh huh. But how do you think you'd fare compared to the average Joe with the
I've
same
done it.
mentality?
I go camping every once in a while, and I used to do a lot of backpacking. I'm just at
Uh-huh.
my age, and with my lifestyle, I think that my idea of roughing it is a cheap hotel.
Right, right. I was just gonna say hotel.
A
And
cheap
mind you,
hotel.
I literally slept in hundreds of different cheap hotels throughout my life, all over the place, all over the world.
That's
And
worth it.
sometimes I actually miss it. There's something about it where you don't have to worry about certain things. Yeah, Max says, yeah, love camping, but then he says, I'm like first watch. Yeah, you see, you get it. That's one of those things. I'm doing first watch. Why are you doing first watch? Because that means you get to sleep the full 8. You're not being woken up in the middle of the night after 4 hours only to do for third watch or whatever, and then okay, you can go back to sleep. Go back to sleep. There might be orcs out there. Are you kidding me? But the simple lessons like that, you probably would have never learned outside of gaming. Other things. Like how about to even have someone watch? How many times have you been camping and nobody stayed up all night, doing watch? Like every time you've ever gone camping, right?
Yeah,
And depending on where you're camping.
Not to over exaggerate or the opposite, not to put too fine a point on it. How many gamers never really paid attention to the encumbrance rules?
Oh God, yeah, yeah. I am a big
You're going to learn
proponent
that one
behind.
in a hurry. You're going to learn that in a hurry. That 30 pounds is your upper limit,
Yep,
including
yep.
including the boots on your feet.
And water. Oh my God, how do you do water? In actual gaming, okay, I've got two quart wine skins full of water. Okay, then what? Do you know how short a period of time that water is going to be gone? It's going to be gone like the next day. Okay, and you think there's going to be a river or a stream in the dungeon? Are you going to drink that water? You gonna filter it and boil it? No, no, none of those rules ever come into play in 90% of the games, and when they do, the DM's being a jerk. Why? Because he's bringing some realism into your fantasy game that you want dark and gritty so it can be realistic. You know how ridiculous that sounds to a guy like me? You want it dark and gritty. Okay, well, you got tetanus and diarrhea in the first day. Okay, game over.
Yep.
You
got a skin infection from sleeping in your armor.
All right. Max
Sorry,
says he's got mountain lions. Max says he's got mountain lions where he lives, so they do the watch, and he can carry a 60-pound ruck camping. Awesome. I don't know about you guys, but because I do the paranormal stuff, um, you know, camping. Depending on where you go camping these days, you may just disappear, and your family will never know what happened to you. So yeah, you may want to think about at the very least having that that trip wire with your aluminum cans as a wake up mechanism or something like that. At the very least these days, because millions of people disappear in this country every year, never to be seen again. And they're not all moving to California to become the homeless. Trust me,
No.
that's not the case. Something
But a lot of
happens.
them do. If you look at the maps where people have disappeared the most, they do correlate with places that have unexplored mines, mine shafts, and cave systems. You can easily fall into an unexplored or an undeveloped mine shaft, or fall into someplace fall into a cave. Break
Well,
a
I know
leg.
what you're saying, Bo, on when it comes to some locations and some maps, but then if you look elsewhere, you'll find there's a lot more people that are disappearing than just those places, and just for those types of reasons. The numbers aren't always advertised because then people would, be scared. And especially if you, go to the national parks, they will tell you stay on the freaking trails.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was just at Mesa Verde National Park 2 weeks ago, and they had a very experienced mountain biker, trail rider, who decided to do some off-trail bicycling in place where it was legal. He had the right permits, he had the backcountry permits, but they still haven't found him because those parks are big. Especially in the West. In the West, you get west of the Mississippi, and the national parks are huge. You get lost at Yellowstone. You get lost at Yosemite. They might never find you. So make sure you tell people where you're going.
Okay, Crafting, he's got a question for us before we hit the road. If the GM is an a-hole for bringing pathogens into the water, as the player, doesn't that make me an a-hole that I always boil water before I drink out of a stream? No, I think you're both on the right path. The GM is on the right path. If the players have decided, expressed a desire in session 0 or whatever that they want to play a realistic, kind of gritty game. Okay, cool. I'm going to break out my, my wilderness and dungeoneers survival guides, as well as my, real world survival guides, and look at things that I might throw at you just to make your game, all that more miserable and enjoyable at the same time. I don't get that, but okay. And see what they think after the first couple of sessions. Would you like me to dial it down, because this is just now it's just a game of attrition and how you guys are going to die. I don't know if that's what you're into and that's what you want. You never want to make it past X level, or if you're playing a skill game, you only want to basically play a couple of one shots before you get tired of it. And Max says, oh, like that glacier body from the 1888, just found him. He disappeared 36 years ago. Found him from a melting glacier. Yeah. Mother Nature hates us. Okay. And every day she's trying to, off us. So be prepared, because, she always wins. Always.
Yeah.
Or at least
Mother
that's
Nature likes the survivors. And especially in my games, because in my games, the clerics don't have cure disease. I'm sorry. So if the clerics don't have cure disease, you can't rely on the cleric to save your bacon when you get Giardia. You gotta take care of your own. You gotta take care of your own Giardia. Sorry.
Lovely.
You play. That's a different game. I don't play my. You've played with my game. My games aren't on easy mode.
No. And there's nothing wrong with that. Especially when everybody's on the, same page at the beginning of the game and they're ready for it. But there's always going to be some people out there that are just, they're the bark's bigger than their bite. They're going to bite off more than they can chew when they say what they want from said game, and then when they get it, they're confused, surprised, and quite possibly enraged because it's not going their way. You're always going to have those guys, and you're always going to have those guys in your prepper situation that are game over, nihilistic, defeatist. You get those guys out of your group, because that infection will spread faster than any other kind of disease, and you just can't have that. You've got to be prepped mentally as well. You can do all the physical stuff, you can do all the buying and selling, but if you're not ready for it up there and you're thinking meat, you will not fare well.
Right. You will not fare well. So again, this week we need you to think about your most likely scenarios that would require prepping for longer than a month. And then think about ways to. Oh, one thing, Shadow made a really good point about if you only have $10 to spend that $10. What I would recommend is spend 5 of it, save the other 5. And for your big ticket purchases, eventually you're going to want to buy something that costs more than $10.
Or 20.
Eventually you're going to want to buy something that costs $500 or $1,000 or whatever it is. And I don't want you to go into debt to buy that thing. So
unless you get like fair warning, like the government says we're about to shut down everything, and you can get online and make an order with Patriot Supply and order a solar generator. Just a tip from a cheapskate. I mean, how can you make payments if the internet's down, right? Can't blame you. Oh, it's delivered on the last mailing day of forever, and you've got a free, more or less solar generator.
I know that,
no, I'm kidding, folks.
John, I know that John wasn't always good about stuff like that, and that's always a possibility. But we're really good bookkeepers, and I'd hate to, in 30 years, I hate to, when society gets back up, and people say, "Oh yeah, you owe me all that plus interest."
Well, I think you could argue that in court, the interest issue. When there are no banks, for 20 years, and good luck finding you, because you probably got ate by zombies. They can come and repossess that solar generator that's sitting out in the middle of nowhere, still working but not doing anything. well, the battery probably would have died. It's just sitting there rusting now, or rotting, or got knocked over by coyotes or something, or worse, raccoons came and took it.
Always a possibility. But so let's prep smarter, not harder, and think about things that we can do this week to make a realistic plan. Because hope is not a plan of action.
Nope, it's just something you should always have, though.
Yeah. Well, you can hope for the best, but let's make some good preps this week, make some good choices, and think about what you're prepping for, because we are probably not all prepping for the same things.
Precisely. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. Thanks to the internet, we get to talk to people all over the place, and even sort of from the grave. Long after most of us are gone. Hopefully, these videos will still be up and helping people. Even if we just help one person today, who knows how many people will help tomorrow and the next day, and years from now when they find these videos. You know, it's just one small way that we can, pay back, life for what it's given us, which is an incredible hobby filled with incredible people that, come and go from our lives. And the best ones stick around for a good long time. And we should all be grateful that, we can even have these discussions, have this hobby, and have these friends that, enjoy, I'm going to say, for the most part, the same things, regardless of genre. We all have a deep passion for this hobby and this sort of mindset. It's given us so many countless hours of enjoyment and fun. Yeah, I'm going to use that 4-letter word a lot more these days, because that's what we're here for. Is to find some fun, find some diversion, entertainment, whatever you want to call it, from more or less the real world. But let's not completely encapsulate ourselves in immersion and getting away from the real world. Sometimes you got to put the dice up and get back to the real world. And if you can take something back from that hobby that will last you until the next session, all the better. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. That's something that I feel really passionately about when it comes to gaming. I know that you and I have talked about that. There are people in this world that say that you're not having fun if you're not doing it their way. To which I say, your hobby, your way. So, yeah, I hope that we are all around doing these things together for years to come. And maybe by that time, I'll have the rest of my minis actually built and painted.
That's never going to happen for me. I can safely say I will have thousands of miniatures that are never going to be painted, and that's not because they're collector items that I'm keeping for posterity, but because the never-ending influx of plastic and metal is never going to stop unless I literally go blind, and even then I'll find a way to paint by braille, or at least
Yeah.
put them together by braille, right? And crafting wants to leave us with one of my favorite sayings of all time: hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
All right.
That's a really good one. So with that, we're gonna say adios until we meet again. So happy trails. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you guys learned something. And if you're watching this later on down the road, feel free to throw something in the comment section, or get a hold of us on Discord or what have you, Facebook, whatever. If you ever want to, just shoot the shit, we're usually here to offer up some friendly advice, and hope you guys have a better gaming experience and a better life because of anything you might have heard today. And if you want to, like I said, add something, please do.
Yeah. And make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more content just like this.
Thanks, man. Love you guys. Happy trails.